30 frames per second, the phrase that launched a million arguments. The hill that gamers will literally die on, and the reason your Twitter feed is constantly filled with people screaming at each other about numbers. FPS versus resolution versus ray tracing. Just imagine you're sitting in a comment section. Someone posts a screenshot of their game running at 4K, 30 frames per second, with ray tracing maxed out, and they say it looks cinematic. Within seconds, the replies start. 30 FPS in 2024. Unplayable. Imagine caring about frame rate over visuals. Human eye can only see 24 FPS anyway. That last guy gets ratioed into oblivion, but he keeps commenting. You try to stay neutral. You fail. Suddenly you're writing a 500-word essay about frame pacing and input latency to a stranger who will never change their mind. This is your life now. But here's the thing. This war didn't start with your comment section argument. It started decades ago, when game developers first had to choose between making games look good and making games feel good. Welcome to the gaming performance wars, where frame rates are religion, resolution is status, but it has ray tracing is the new but it has a good personality. This is every gaming performance war explained. Grab your frame rate counters. We're about to get technical. 30 vs 60 vs 120 vs beyond. The frame rate wars. Picture a religious conflict, except instead of theology, people are arguing about how many pictures per second makes a game playable. And instead of centuries, this war has been raging since the 1990s with no end in sight. 30 FPS, 60 FPS, 120 FPS, 240 FPS. Each number has its defenders. Each number has its enemies, and each number has people who will call you an idiot for preferring anything else. Here's the funny thing. Old games ran at 60 FPS all the time. Sonic the Hedgehog, 60 FPS. Super Mario World, 60 FPS. Games in the 16-bit era were smooth. Then 3D happened, and suddenly everything got complicated. 3D graphics were expensive. Consoles weren't powerful enough. So developers had to choose, do we make the game look impressive, or do we make it feel smooth? Most chose looks. 30 FPS became the console standard, and PC gamers have been insufferable about it ever since. The PlayStation and Nintendo 64 era cemented 30 FPS as acceptable. Game magazines didn't even mention frame rate in reviews. It just wasn't discussed. As long as the game ran, it ran. Meanwhile, PC gamers were experiencing something different. Quake at 100+ FPS, Counter-Strike at whatever your CRT could handle, and they developed a condition where anything below 60 FPS physically hurts to look at. Once you've seen 60, you can't go back to 30. Once you've seen 120, 60 feels choppy. Once you've seen 240, well, at that point, you've spent $500 on a monitor and you need to believe you can see the difference. PC gamers started calling console players' eyes broken. Console players called PC gamers elitist snobs. Both groups were right. The Great Divide was born. And then, someone said it. The phrase that would become the most mocked statement in gaming history. 30 FPS is more cinematic. The logic? Movies run at 24 FPS, and movies look great. Therefore, 30 FPS games are basically interactive movies. It's not a limitation, it's an artistic choice. This argument gets dunked on constantly, but it refuses to die. Every time a new console game locks to 30, someone in the comments will unironically defend it as cinematic. And every time, they will get destroyed. Today, modern consoles finally gave players the choice. Performance mode, 60 FPS at lower resolution. Quality mode, 30 FPS with all the bells and whistles. Democracy, freedom. The wars should be over, right? Wrong. Now people argue about which mode is correct. Some games have unbalanced modes. Some performance modes look terrible. Some quality modes are locked to 30 FPS when 40 FPS was right there. The arguments never stop, they just evolve. But frame rate is only half the equation. Because while gamers were arguing about smoothness, another war was brewing. A war about how many pixels you really need. A war where 4K or nothing became a personality. Welcome to the resolution wars, where the numbers keep getting bigger, but nobody can agree if they can actually see the difference. 1080p versus 1440p versus 4K versus 8K. The resolution wars. Picture an arms race where the weapons are pixels, the casualties are your GPU, and victory means bragging rights in a forum post nobody will read. 720p. 1080p, 1440p, 4K, 8K. Each generation, the numbers double, the marketing gets louder, and someone in the comments insists that anything less than native 4K is literally unplayable. The war really started with HD, When the Xbox 360 and PS3 launched, HD gaming was the selling point. 720p, maybe even 1080p sometimes. Your old CRT was obsolete. Buy an HD TV or be left behind. Of course, most games ran at 720p or lower. Some ran at bizarre resolutions like 1024 by 600. But the marketing said HD, so it was HD. Nobody checked. We trusted them. And then Digital Foundry showed up. And suddenly everyone knew exactly what resolution their games were running at. And everyone got mad. By the PS4 and Xbox One generation, 1080p became the goal, full HD. The resolution wars should have ended. Everyone agreed 1080p at 30 FPS was the target. We achieved it. We could finally stop arguing. Just kidding. People immediately started arguing about 1440p and 4K TVs started showing up. And suddenly 1080p wasn't good enough anymore. The goalpost didn't just move, it grew legs and sprinted away. PC gamers had been at 1440p for years. They looked at console players hitting 1080p and said, "Welcome to 2010. The smugness was nuclear. Then came the 4K era. Sony released the PS4 Pro. Microsoft released the Xbox One X with true 4K plastered on every advertisement. 4K became the only number that mattered. Marketing departments went insane. Here's the problem. 4K is 4 times the pixels of 1080p. That's 4 times the processing power. So most 4K games were actually using tricks, checkerboard rendering, dynamic resolution, anything to hit that number on the box. Was it native 4K? No. Could anyone tell the difference on their couch 10 feet away? Also no. But the number was there, and numbers are what matter in wars. And now, 8K exists. Marketing departments are already calling games 8K ready. Samsung sells 8K TVs, and absolutely nobody needs them. Even the most powerful GPU on the planet struggles with 8K gaming. The human eye literally cannot perceive the difference at normal viewing distances. But somewhere, someone is arguing that 8K is the future. And they will not be stopped. But resolution and frame rate are old battles. There's a new war now. A war that's divided the gaming community like nothing before. A war about whether your game should simulate light, ray tracing, the feature that tanks your performance for slightly better reflections. Let's talk about it. The ray tracing wars. Picture someone buying a $500 graphics card specifically so puddles can reflect buildings slightly more accurately. That's ray tracing. It's beautiful, it's expensive, and it caused more drama than anyone expected. Ray tracing versus performance. It's the newest battle in the performance wars. And somehow it made the frame rate arguments look civil. In 2018, Nvidia revealed the RTX 20 series, the first consumer GPUs with hardware ray tracing. Jensen Huang stood on stage in his leather jacket, because of course the leather jacket, and promised us the future of graphics. Ray tracing simulates how light actually behaves. Reflections, shadows, global illumination, all calculated like real physics. It's the holy grail of graphics. It's also incredibly demanding. The RTX 2080 Ti cost $1,200, and when you turned on ray tracing, your frame rate got cut in half. Sometimes more. You paid $1,200 to play at 30 FPS. The irony was not lost on anyone, but Nvidia had a plan: DLSS, deep learning supersampling, an AI that upscales lower resolution images to look like higher resolution. In other words, cheat code for performance. Render the game at 1080p, use AI magic to make it look like 4K, get your frames back. It was brilliant, it actually worked, and it made ray tracing actually viable. Of course, AMD didn't have DLSS, so AMD users couldn't play with ray tracing without tanking their performance. And the AMD versus Nvidia war got even spicier. AMD eventually released FSR, Fidelity FX Super Resolution, their answer to DLSS. It didn't require special hardware. It worked on any GPU. Even Nvidia GPUs could use it. The problem? Early FSR wasn't as good as DLSS. It was blurrier. Artifacts appeared. The internet exploded with comparison videos where people zoomed in 400% to show the difference. FSR 2.0 and 3.0 improved things. Frame generation entered the chat. Now AMD users could argue their upscaler was basically as good, and Nvidia users could argue it definitely wasn't. The debates continue to this day. Oh, and we should mention the puddle incident. When Spider-Man PS4 was compared to early footage, people noticed some puddles were missing. The internet lost its mind. They removed puddles. Downgrade. Betrayal. It turned out the puddles were just moved, not removed. But for a brief moment, puddles became the most important issue in gaming. Ray tracing makes puddles look better. Remember that. Puddles matter. Frame rate, resolution, ray tracing. These are the battles, but there's a war that encompasses all of them. A conflict that's been raging since the beginning of gaming itself. A holy war that will never ever end. Console versus PC, the eternal performance debate. Let's dive in. Console versus PC. Picture two religions that have been at war for decades. Both believe they're right. Both have sacred texts, benchmark comparisons, and exclusivity lists. Both think the other side is full of heretics. This isn't just a performance war, it's an identity war, and performance is just the ammunition both sides use to shoot at each other. PC has always had the performance advantage. Always. From the beginning. When consoles were running games at 30 FPS, PCs could run the same games at 60. When consoles hit 1080p, PCs were at 4K. The gap has always existed, but here's the thing, PCs also cost 3 times as much. A gaming PC that matches a console at launch costs way more. Console players know this. They bring it up constantly. PC players counter with, but games are cheaper on Steam sales. Console players counter with, I just want to play on my couch. PC players mention Steam Deck. Console players mention convenience. This goes on forever. Every console generation, PC YouTubers release console killer builds. Build this $500 PC and it beats the PS5, they claim. And technically in specific benchmarks with specific games at specific settings, sometimes they're right, but then you factor in Windows license, the keyboard and mouse, the need to actually build it, the driver issues. Suddenly that console killer requires a lot more than just $500. Console players point this out. PC players say building is part of the fun. Console players say, I don't want it to be fun. I want it to work. And we're back to the eternal loop. Console players have one genuine trump card: optimization. Developers know exactly what hardware consoles have. They can squeeze every ounce of performance out of it. God of War Ragnarok looks incredible at 30 FPS because Sony optimized it specifically for PlayStation. PC games have to run on thousands of different hardware configurations. Optimization is harder. Bad PC ports exist. We'll fix it in a patch is basically a tradition at this point. But then PC players bring up mods, higher frame rates, and the fact that they can run games from 1995 without buying a separate classic subscription. And round we go. Here's the truth. Current gen consoles are actually pretty good. 60 FPS is common. 120 FPS exists. Ray tracing works. The gap between a $500 console and a $1,500 PC has never been smaller, which ironically makes the arguments more intense. When the gap was huge, PC players could feel superior. Now they have to justify their extra $1,000. And they will, aggressively. But there's one more battlefield we haven't touched. A war that's been fought in the shadows of the gaming community. A war where milliseconds matter. Where I died because of lag is either a valid complaint or the ultimate excuse. Input lag. Response time. The invisible enemy. Let's get technical. The input lag wars. Picture a competitive gamer losing a match by 1 frame, roughly 16 milliseconds, then spending $2,000 on a monitor, a new controller, and special cables to make sure it never happens again. For casual players, input lag doesn't exist. For competitive players, it's the difference between winning and the game cheated me. Welcome to the world where milliseconds are worth hundreds of dollars. Input lag is the delay between pressing a button and seeing the result on screen. Your controller sends a signal. The console or PC processes it. The game renders a frame. The monitor displays it. Every step adds time. A good setup might have 20 milliseconds of input lag. A bad setup might have 100 milliseconds or more. The difference between responsive and why does my character feel drunk? Most people can't consciously detect the difference, but your brain knows, your hands know. And competitive players, they've built entire careers around eliminating these milliseconds. Monitor manufacturers started an arms race. 1 milliseconds response time, they screamed. 0.5 milliseconds, now with even less delay. Every monitor box is covered in millisecond claims. Here's the dirty secret. Most of those numbers are measured in ways that don't reflect actual gaming. Gray-to-gray response time is different from input lag. MPRT is different from GTG. It's deliberately confusing. But gamers bought in. 144Hz monitors, 240Hz monitors, 360Hz monitors for people who really need to see 360 frames per second, each claiming to reduce input lag further. And then there's controllers. For years the rule was simple. Wired means less lag. Wireless adds delay. Pro players used wired controllers religiously. Wireless was for casuals, but modern wireless technology has nearly eliminated the gap. Tests show top wireless controllers have less lag than some wired ones. Did that stop the debate? Of course not. People still argue about it constantly. Some pros switched to wireless. Others insisted wired is still better just in case. The science says it doesn't matter. The debates say otherwise. Milliseconds matter. But there's one more technology that changed the performance war entirely. A technology designed to make all of these problems disappear. A technology that added even more confusion to an already confusing landscape. Variable refresh rate, G-Sync, FreeSync, and the chaos they created. G-Sync versus FreeSync versus whatever works. The VRR wars. Picture two companies solving the same problem with different solutions, then spending a decade convincing everyone that their solution is superior. Sound familiar? It's the tech industry's favorite game, G-Sync, FreeSync, HDMI, VRR, three names for essentially the same thing, and somehow people still argue about which is best. First, the problem VRR solves: screen tearing. When your GPU outputs frames faster or slower than your monitor refreshes, you get ugly horizontal lines. Your image literally tears apart. The old solution was VSync. Lock the frame rate to the monitor refresh rate. No more tearing. But if your game dropped below 60 FPS, stuttering, input lag, a cure worse than the disease. VRR fixed this by making the monitor match the GPU's output dynamically. 58 FPS, monitor runs at 58 Hz. 72 FPS, monitor runs at 72 Hz. No tearing, no stuttering, just smooth variable performance. NVIDIA created G-Sync first. It required a special chip in monitors. It worked flawlessly. It also added $200 to every monitor's price because NVIDIA charged licensing fees. AMD responded with FreeSync. It used open standards, no special chip required. Monitors were cheaper. AMD users celebrated. NVIDIA users insisted G-Sync was still premium quality. Then NVIDIA released G-Sync compatible, which let their GPUs use FreeSync monitors, essentially admitting FreeSync was fine, but they still sell premium G-Sync modules, because branding matters more than technology. Today, almost every gaming monitor and TV has some form of VRR. Consoles support it. PCs support it. Your TV probably supports it. The war is essentially over. VRR won, but people still argue about G-Sync versus FreeSync, about which implementation is true VRR, about whether budget monitors do it wrong. The technology is solved. The arguments continue anyway. Think about it. We went from does the game run to does the game run at exactly 60 frames per second with ray-traced reflections at native 4K with sub 20 ms input lag in one generation. Our standards have become insane, and you know what? That's good. Every argument pushes developers to do better. Every angry forum post about frame rate makes someone optimize their game a little more. Every 30 FPS is unplayable comment makes publishers think twice. We complain because we care. We argue because we want games to be better. The performance wars aren't just drama, they're the driving force behind every improvement we've seen. 30 FPS was fine, then it wasn't. 1080p was the goal, then it wasn't. Ray tracing was impossible, then it wasn't. Input lag was ignored, then it wasn't. We keep pushing, we keep demanding more, and games keep getting better. The performance wars will never end, and honestly, they shouldn't. Because the moment we stop arguing about performance is the moment we stop improving. Keep fighting, keep complaining, keep demanding better. Alright, I want to know, where do you stand? Are you a frame rate purist who won't touch 30 FPS? A resolution junkie who needs native 4K? Do you think ray tracing is worth it, or is it just fancy puddles? Drop it in the comments, start an argument. It's tradition at this point. And if you want to see us cover the CPU wars, the GPU wars, or the console wars themselves, make sure you subscribe and let us know. Because these debates are what make gaming culture special, and we'll be here analyzing every frame, counting every pixel, and measuring every millisecond alongside you. Until next time, may your frame rates be high, your input lag be low, and your performance mode be properly optimized. GG.